Trucker Dump for May 27th, 2013, Episode 93, The Driver's Seat Phenomenon.
Welcome to Trucker Dump, where you'll get one driver's insights and sometimes humorous views of truck driving and the trucking industry, and pretty much anything else he feels like dumping on you. This podcast is brought to you by AboutTruckDriving.com. Resources to help you understand the world of truck driving through the use of stories and a pathetic attempt at humor.
Howdy folks, Todd McCann here. First, I need to make sure everyone's okay. I did miss my 2-week mark that I was aiming for. I apologize. I know how painful that must have been for y'all. Yeah, right. Well, I'll have you know, I've got a perfectly legitimate excuse for the delay. I was busy screwing off. That's just the truth of the matter. I was shut down for another 38 hours a couple of weekends ago. And for you regular listeners, you'll know I've been keeping track of these. You'll be happy to know that this 34-hour break actually would have counted with the new rule. So 1 out of 4 ain't bad, right? Jeez. Check out TD093, Bungling the 34-Hour Rule, if you need to catch up on that. Anywho, back to a couple of weeks ago. I just so happened to be shut down at a truck stop with free Wi-Fi. Since I'm usually at a Pilot or a Flying J where they charge for Wi-Fi, I felt that wasting the opportunity would cause a rift in the force. Now my mind told me to start a blog post and record the podcast. My fingers, however, decided to pop open Netflix, just for a little while. Yep, you know what happened then. Since the evil overlord and I like to watch new movies together, I went with some old ones. I started off with True Grit. That's the one with the Duke. And Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which I had never seen before. Both are great flicks. Next, I watched a spy movie called Haywire that I'd heard about on a podcast. That put me in a kick-butt mood, so I topped that off with SEAL Team 6. That was pretty good, too. Of course, any movie depicting someone putting a bullet into Osama should be nominated for a Grammy. Once the truck stop started filling up, the Wi-Fi got a bit cranky. Now you'd think that'd be a good time to start writing, but no, I popped in a DVD of Dragonfly to wait it out. I'd seen it before, but it had been so long I didn't remember a lick of it. It was okay, I guess. Nothing to write home about. Once I finally got tired, I capped it off with Breakfast at Tiffany's. Man, that Audrey Hepburn was babe-olicious when she was young. As I crawled into bed, I swore to myself that I'd start writing as soon as I crawled out of bed. Well, I got up and did the 3 B's, that's breakfast, Bible, and bended knee, then opened my laptop to start writing. Unfortunately, I'd forgotten that my Mac opens up all my previous windows, so naturally, Netflix popped up with a few suggestions. How could I resist? I wound up watching a couple of documentaries about qualifying to be an Army Ranger or a Green Beret. Suffice it to say, I'd have ducked out on day 1, because I'm a wuss like that. What can I say? The Wi-Fi signal started sucking again, but I'm very persistent about slacking off when I set my mind to it. So I played iPhone games every time Netflix had to buffer, which was about every 5 or 10 minutes. It takes real dedication for this kind of screw-off mastery. That means it took about 2.5 hours to learn that Siberian tigers really like the smell of urine. And apparently, they like to hump 10 to 12 times a day too. But of course, only when the female gets in the mood. So, it's kind of like marriage, I guess. Now, I knew I was going to have some time to write the next day after I drove for 10 hours. I did. But amazingly, that truck stop had free Wi-Fi too. I'm telling you, it was a conspiracy. I watched another flick called Ghost Dog that I'd heard mentioned in a podcast. It pretty much sucked. Just don't even go there unless you like to watch someone drive with rap music blaring and an expressionless look on their face. The first 10 minutes, that was it. Seriously, I was watching the clock. Ugh, it was awful. I should have given up at that point, but instead I took another recommendation from the same podcast. Yep, I'm not real bright sometimes. This was actually a good one, though. It was an odd little independent Western film called Dead Man. With Johnny Depp in the lead, it was pretty much impossible for it to not be good. It was a bit weird, though. That's indie films for you. So anyway, I finally got to a truck stop without free Wi-Fi. So here I sit, finally writing. But do you know what? The whole time I was sitting in my truck watching movies, there's one place that I didn't sit, the driver's seat. And quite frankly, that's a bit odd for a trucker. So let's examine what I like to call the driver's seat phenomenon. If you'll remember from the last podcast called Honor Among Truckers, I mentioned that if you were to drive around a truck stop parking lot, you'd see lots of drivers sitting in the driver's seat whiling away the hours. They're talking on their phones, doing paperwork, people watching, playing with their laptops, turned around at an awkward angle watching their TV, or even weirder, staring off into space with a blank expression. I just don't get it. And since the word phenomenon makes anything sound more mysterious than it actually is, I've chosen to call this one the driver's seat phenomenon. Here's the thing I just don't get. The average solo trucker drives approximately 120,000 miles a year. I actually ran about 127 last year. All of those miles are done while sitting in the driver's seat. Yes, the driver's seats in these trucks are highly adjustable to make the long hours of driving tolerable. Yes, they have air ride suspension to keep you from feeling like Superman punched you in the tailbone every time your load takes you on US 69 near Stringtown, Oklahoma. But even with all that, why in the name of Zeus's hemorrhoids would you want to spend even one more second in that seat when you don't have to? Now sure, I understand that team drivers have more of an excuse to be welded to the driver's seat. Maybe your co-driver's getting out of bed and you don't want to see his great hairy chasm of a butt crack sticking out of his tighty-whities. Can't say as I blame you there. Or maybe your co-driver is your wife and you actually do want to see her backside, but she's meaner than a giraffe with strep throat when she first wakes up, meaning you'd have a better chance of getting lucky with said giraffe than with her. Not that I have any experience with that whatsoever. Anywho, another scenario when you might need to occupy the driver's seat is when you're shut down and your co-driver is trying to sleep. Since the evil overlord and I always tried to keep on a set schedule, this used to happen to us a lot, especially when the economy took a kamikaze-worthy nosedive in 2008. I used to put my TV in the passenger seat and sit sideways in the driver's seat for hours while playing video games on my PlayStation 3. After all, the giraffe, wife needed her sleep if I were to keep her from waking up tired and smiting the world with her mighty hand. I tried to be super quiet up there, but even with the curtain closed, the evil overlord would often wake up when she'd hear me cussing under my breath or feel the truck moving as I shook my controller in frustration. Hey, what can I say? Some of those games are friggin' hard. Still, I didn't sit in the driver's seat because I wanted to. Like I said, I had the fate of the world in my hands. Now that I'm a solo driver, I've got absolutely no good reason to sit in the driver's seat when I'm shut down. Therefore, I don't. When I start my day, I do my 3 B's in the bunk area where I've got a nice little desk to eat and read on. The bed makes an excellent place for the bend knee part, too. If I stop for lunch, I hop in the bunk area and eat back there if I have time. If not, I make my traditional peanut butter and jelly sandwich and then eat on the run. If I'm picking up or delivering a load, I vacate the driver's seat and go lounge on the bed with my feet propped up. At the end of my driving shift, I'm required to log a 5-minute post-trip inspection. A walk-around inspection only takes about 2 minutes, so I just do paperwork or hop on Twitter for a few minutes. But once that 5 minutes is up and I hit the button on my retarded e-log unit, I'm out of the driver's seat and sitting on the nice soft bunk while I make yet another bowl of soup while watching a DVD and ignoring the fact that I have a podcast due. The fact is, I spend way too much time in the driver's seat already. If you want a really good look at the shape of my butt, and who wouldn't, just look at the driver's seat, because there are some super lifelike butt prints there. Good thing butt prints aren't like fingerprints, else there'd be a heck of a lot of identity theft in the trucking industry. And by the way, if you're sniff testing your newly assigned truck for hidden cigarette smoke, I'd advise against putting your nose right up against the driver's seat. Anywhere but the driver's seat. You have been warned. So what's up with this obsession of the driver's seat? Why do so many of you drivers choose to spend your off-duty hours sitting in a seat where you already spend so much time? And why the heck are y'all staring into space? These are serious questions that I really want to know the answer to. I think about it every time I walk into the truck stop and see drivers sitting there and watching the world go by. What's so stinking fascinating about seeing me walk into the truck stop or watching the guy down the way back into a parking spot? I just don't get it. And lastly, why on earth would you spend even one extra second in a seat that's been farted in more times than OMG has been texted by teenagers?
Hey, yo, bud, where do you want this load of feedback?
Alright, for today's feedback, we're jumping over to the jobshadow.com website, where I did an interview. Well, I guess I've mentioned this about 1,000,000 times, but just in case you haven't heard it, or you were ignoring me, which is probably very likely, I did an interview over there. It is called Interview with a Truck Driver 2. I am the second guy that did one. Mine is a lot longer than the other guys. I'm getting some really good questions over there, and the readers over there tend to like my article because it's long. For a change of pace, somebody likes me being long-winded. But when I did that interview, I didn't see any sense in just doing short answers because I didn't think it would answer anybody's questions about trucking. So I went ahead and went full bore. But people are acting like they kind of appreciate it. Paul is one of them. He wrote in and said, "When I was 17, I got into a small car accident. I was driving a car that was under my father's car insurance, but I was not on the plan because putting a new driver on is very expensive. Long story short, some lady hit me and we reported it, and I went for physical therapy for a while. Blah, blah, blah." That's his words, not mine. He says, "I'm 19 now and I want to get my CDL driver's license so I can drive trucks. My question is, does the accident I got into 2 years ago matter when I apply to drive trucks, considering I was not on the insurance? Thanks for the help." Well, Paul, thanks for stopping by and giving me some feedback fodder. So you want to know, does your accident matter to prospective employers? That depends. Let's look at 3 things. 1. Trucking companies look at all accidents, whether in a car or a truck. No matter what you do, don't try to hide the truth on your application. If they find out you're lying about something on an application, they'll likely start playing NBA star with your wadded up application in the corner trash can. Whew, 3-pointer. Number 2, you were a minor at the time, so I believe they would consider you not being on your father's insurance to be his fault, not yours. So don't sweat that one. It also makes a huge difference to trucking companies that the accident wasn't your fault. And thirdly, each company sets their own guidelines when it comes to listing accidents on an employment application. Most ask for any accidents within the past 2 to 5 years, so you may not even be required to list it. Now here's the thing, I just wouldn't worry about that accident all that much. We've all made mistakes and trucking companies know this. For instance, I had an accident in my personal vehicle a couple of years before I started trucking. It was even partially my fault, but it didn't keep me from getting multiple job offers. And lastly, Paul, I know there's a bunch of truckers out there yelling, "Todd, you're missing the big point." No, I didn't miss it. I've got it right here for you. There is one thing it sounds like you're not aware of, Paul. I hate to squash your dreams, but unless there's some special exemption in your state, the minimum age to drive a big rig is 21. Even then, you can only drive within your state. In order to drive over the road, a CDL holder has to be 23 years old. If you know otherwise, please write back and let me know. Good luck. And next up, Frank writes in. He says, "Hi, Todd. I'd like to thank you for the support here. I've been working for this local company for 7 years in San Diego. I made $20 an hour, usually around $640 with a few hours overtime during the week. I do construction equipment delivery and pickup. It's a local job. Here in San Diego, it's very hard to buy a house with my budget. I found that I like driving more than the loading or unloading. In this field, you have to be a good driver because you have to pull in small parking places, back up in places that you can't imagine you can fit. Some equipment is easier than others. For example, some equipment is electric and others are fuel or diesel, so you don't have to park next to the building to unload it." And now we're getting into Frank's question. He goes on and says, anyways, I'm considering a move to Tucson, Arizona. There's not many local jobs now, but the only ones you see is over-the-road jobs. I wish I could find a job with dedicated runs going from Tucson. I don't care if I have to be out a few days, but I have to be home on weekends because I'm an opera singer and have some jobs on the weekends. Cool, an opera singer trucker. Guess those NPR billboards aren't all wrong, huh? Anyway, he goes on and says, my present job is okay, but I'm on the evening shift, which I start at 12 p.m. to 9 p.m. with a 1-hour lunch. My history is very clean as a driver, no tickets or anything bad. I've had my CDL since 2005. I found in Craigslist for Tucson, Arizona, an ad of a dedicated run Tucson to southern St. Louis, where they offer $1,122 for that run. I think that's for both ways, but no benefits. Do you know any good company in Arizona? I do appreciate your time. Thanks. Well, Frank, and clearly you don't listen to the podcast or follow me on Twitter or read my blog. And that's just fine. Not everybody does. So I'll go ahead and tell you what my personal policy is. I make it my personal policy not to recommend any particular carriers, mainly because what makes a good company for one person might make an awful one for another driver. One thing I will confirm is something that you seem to know already. The longer you're out on the road, the more money you'll make. So if you find a good dedicated job that will have you home every few days, you'll likely make more money than you do on your local job. But it still won't be as much as you'd make as an over-the-road driver. There are exceptions to this rule, but quite frankly, those jobs are extremely hard to find. And even if you do find one, the waiting list will likely be as long as a truck convoy. I know what you mean about it being hard to make ends meet. It's sad that having a skilled job isn't worth your while unless you spend weeks at a time on the road. But as they say, that's trucking. Thanks for stopping by, Frank. And last up for today, Shelley writes in. She says, thanks, Todd, for all the information. I've been debating about trucking for some time. I'm a woman in her 40s with no kids, just dogs. I will, of course, be wanting to take my 2 female mini schnauzers with me. I had a friend who had recommended I try trucking. He and his wife trucked together for many years. I'm just a bit nervous about trucking schools. Can I really learn to drive a semi in 15 days? Anyway, I appreciate your honesty. Thanks for the input. By the way, do you communicate more by cell phone or computer when you're on the road? Well, Shelley, that is a great question. It's also a loaded question. So, can you learn to drive a semi in 15 days? Well, you can certainly learn well enough to get your Class A CDL, your commercial driver's license, but you won't be proficient at it for a long time afterwards. Now, having said that, don't let it stop you from trying if that's what you want to do. The evil overlord, my wife, an ex-co-driver, had her doubts about it too. Yet once she got in school, she wound up being one of the better drivers. And to her surprise, she was even better than most of her classmates at backing. She even wound up helping a couple of her classmates with it. Nearly every woman driver I've talked to had their doubts, but in the end, they're all out here driving. As for communicating while out here on the road, well, that depends. I tend to use my beloved iPhone to talk to the evil overlord, with the occasional video chat thrown in when the dorky little nephews are spending some time with her. But for everyone else, I use the computer for communicating. I'm not a big fan of Facebook, but many drivers are. I am a Twitter junkie, though, so I talk to a lot of people on there. For questions and comments about my blog posts, I usually use email. And naturally, for my job shadow interview, I use the comment section over there. The thing is, you've got to be really careful giving out your phone number to other truck drivers. At least that's my experience anyway. This would be especially true for a woman driver. There are a lot of lonely guys out here. If you give them your phone number, you'd better be prepared to use the block feature. Well, Shelley, good luck with whatever you decide. And that'll just about wrap it up for this time. If you've got questions, concerns, suggestions for a topic, or just want to throw some inappropriate insults at me, here's how you can do it. Come on now, truckers, I'm really serious about understanding the driver's seat phenomenon. If you're one of those driver's seat sitters, why do you do it? Get on over to abouttruckdriving.com, type TD093 into the search bar, and leave your excuses. Audio comments are welcome too. Simply record them on your phone and email them to truckerdump@gmail.com. I can also be found on Twitter at twitter.com/ToddMcCann. That's 2 D's, 2 C's, and 2 N's. I'd also appreciate it if you'd follow Darkstaff's example and leave an iTunes review when you get a chance. Well, thanks to those of you who are listening and passing the word along. So until next time, drive safe and stay out of my way. And quit watching me walk into the truck stop. It's creepy.